Welcome back. We're talking about how the credit card companies are screwing you before February when the laws changed. Lawrence, first back up. So what is the situation here? When were the new laws passed? When do they take effect?
Sure. So to begin with, credit card companies were making $15 billion a year off different penalty fees from consumers. That's a lot of money. And there were some pretty deceptive practices that were taking place. So Congress and the White House stepped in. They passed what they called comprehensive credit card reform in this past May. Obama signed it into law. It was called landmark legislation to protect consumers. Everyone was happy. So the rules as a compromise go into effect February 2010. That means two things. One, credit card issuers are rushing to raise rates and other fees before the new rules go into effect. And two, they're coming up with creative new ways to make up for the anticipated lost revenue.
And so the laws don't make it illegal for them to screw you.
Right.
So what do the laws do then?
Sure. Well, they ban some notoriously deceptive practices that have been commonplace in the industry.
Such as?
So the first was changing interest rates anytime for any reason. So you'd sign up for a card, in theory read all the fine print, it would say, this is a 15% APR if you go over your limit. Fair. But somewhere buried in that 4-page document that no one really reads was, we can change it for any time, any reason. And so retroactively, and in some difficult to understand notice, they would say, well, it's actually going to 30% from 15, and people wouldn't realize it and get screwed.
So now it's changing in advance to 30%.
Right, so now you need a minimum 45-day warning, I believe, and other easier to understand ways of knowing it's a variable rate.
Now, in a feature on the site, you've gone through many, many different things that are coming in, all sorts of new fees, old fees getting jacked up, everything else. Doesn't sound like people are going to avoid paying a king's ransom for these cards. But there is pushback. Right away, a reader said, well, hey, it's free market. Don't use a credit card if you don't want them.
Right, so, and that will always be the criticism. Of course, you can avoid all the hassle of fees and penalties and surcharges by simply spending within your means and paying on time. But I do think most of these reforms had merit. There were some notoriously deceptive practices, like mailing out bills so that if you didn't pay them almost the second you received the American Express invoice, you would get a late fee just by the average turnaround of taking a day, putting a check in the mail and sending it back. Or again, this any time for any reason structure, which was, I think, inherently unfair.
So given what's going on now, with this rush to get the huge changes in before the rules, will the new laws help?
I think that they will help some of the, again, fixing the most egregious practices, but at the end of the day, credit card companies will figure out new ways to make money. For instance, Bank of America recently introduced $29 to $99 annual fees on a lot of its cards, even for low-risk customers. So I think more and more people will be paying an annual fee. Also, again, interest rates are being jacked up before February, so a Citi card now can have an APR of 30%. As opposed to 15% or whatever it was before. So if you spend beyond your means and are late in paying it back, you will get yourself into a lot of trouble regardless of any rules from the White House.
Thanks, Lawrence.
My pleasure.